Insights from Chapter 1. Number 1. Warren Buffett is an American investor, businessman, and the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, an American multinational conglomerate holding company. According to Buffett, Balzac said that behind every great fortune lies a crime. That's not true at Berkshire. Number 2. Buffett met with author Alice Schroeder to tell her his life story so she could write his biography. She immediately noted his humility. Before he began telling his story, he told her, "Whenever my version is different from somebody else's, use the less flattering version." Insights from Chapter 2. Number 1. Most of the press liked Buffett, who went out of his way not to be disliked by anyone. He also intrigued them. His public image was that of a simple man, and he seemed genuine, yet he lived a complicated life. Number 2. Buffett spoke in simple maxims with a kindly twinkle in his eye and had a notably loyal group of friends, yet along the way he had earned a reputation as a tough, icy dealmaker. He seemed to shun publicity, yet managed to attract more of it than almost any other businessman on earth. Number 3. The Sun Valley Conference was a top-tier conference for the economic elite, and unlike most others, people couldn't buy their way in. Part of the thrill of coming was to see who was not invited, and more thrilling still, who was disinvited. Number 4. Buffett loved Sun Valley as a family vacation spot because he hated normal outdoors vacations where he never had anything to do. For him, Sun Valley was about reuniting with his whole family during one of the rare times most of the family spent together. Number 5. Buffett gave a speech at the closing of the 1999 conference about investing. He explained that what you're doing when you invest is deferring consumption and laying money out now to get more money back at a later time. The two questions are how much you're going to get back and when. Number 6. To him, expecting the stock market to keep flourishing was wishful thinking. Although innovation might lift the world out of poverty, people who invest in innovation, historically, have not been rewarded afterward. Number 7. For several years, the market's valuation had outstripped the economy's growth by an enormous degree. Buffett thought this meant that the trend would continue, and people who invested in the internet would get screwed. The audience, all investors, started to worry. Number 8. Many were not convinced. They believed that Buffett was rationalizing having missed the technology boom, and they were startled to see him make such specific predictions, prophecies that surely would turn out to be wrong. And of course, they were. Number 9. All that people could remember from that year's Sun Valley Conference was Buffett's talk about the stock market, the first forecast he had made in exactly 30 years. Insights from Chapter 3. Number 1. Charles T. Munger was Buffett's business partner. They thought alike and had the same fascination with business as a puzzle worth spending a lifetime to solve. Both regarded rationality and honesty as the highest virtues. Quick impulses and self-delusion, in their view, were the major causes of mistakes. Number 2. Buffett and Munger loved to talk. They had been each other's best audience ever since they first met through mutual friends over lunch in 1959. Since then, they'd carried on an uninterrupted conversation for decades. Eventually, they could read each other's minds, stopped talking, and carried on by telepathy. Number 3. Munger was a creature of habit, according to Buffett. He loved sticking to his daily routines. Buffett's life was even simpler than Munger's, despite a personality that was far more complex. Insights from Chapter 4. Number 1. Nearly all of Buffett's $30 billion plus, 99%, was invested in the stock of Berkshire Hathaway. People paid attention to him because he was rich. To Buffett, the stock price represented an uncomplicated measure of his success. Number 2. That's why when he predicted that the market could disappoint investors for 17 years, Buffett was taking a risk, and he knew it. If he was wrong, not only would he be the laughingstock of Sun Valley and in the record books of the world's wealthiest men, his personal rank might drop. Number 3. Near the end of 1999, even many longtime value investors who followed Buffett's style had either shuttered their businesses or given in and bought technology stocks. Buffett did not. His toughness about financial decisions and inner confidence kept him from wavering. Insights from Chapter 5. Number 1. John Buffett, the first known Buffett in the New World, was a weaver believed to be of French Huguenot descent. He fled to America in the 17th century to escape religious persecution and settled in Huntington, Long Island as a farmer. Number 2. The Buffetts were tradespeople, not members of the merchant or professional class, but as pioneer settlers of Omaha, they were exceedingly conscious of their place. Howard, a third son and Warren's father, was born in 1903. Number 3. At the University of Nebraska, Howard majored in journalism and worked at the college newspaper, the Daily Nebraskan, where he was able to combine the outsider's love of reporting on the activities of the powerful with the family fascination with politics. He married Leila Stahl, and they had Warren. Number 4. When he was a kid, Warren had the advantage of a home where people talked about interesting things. He had intelligent parents and went to decent schools. He didn't get money from his parents, nor did he want it, but he was born at the right time and place. Number 5. Buffett always credited most of his success to luck. When it came to recollections of his family, however, he was creating some of his own reality. He doesn't think he could have been raised with a better set of parents. Insights from Chapter 6. Number 1. In 1927, Howard Buffett got a job as a stockbroker with Union State Bank. 2 years later, on Black Tuesday, October 29, 1929, the stock market dropped $14 billion in a single day. Amid the bankruptcies and suicides that followed, people began to hoard money, and nobody wanted stocks. Number 2. Howard and two partners, Carl Falk and George Sklecnica, filed the papers to start a brokerage firm, Buffett, Sklecnica & Co. It was a crazy decision to open a stockbroking business at a time when no one wanted to buy stocks, yet it was a moderate success and kept the Buffetts from starving. Number 3. Politics, money, and philosophy were acceptable topics for dinner table discussion at the Buffett house, but feelings were not. Howard and Leila were notable for their lack of warmth. Nobody in the Buffett household said, "I love you," and nobody tucked the children into bed with a kiss. Number 4. After Howard left for work in the morning, Warren and his older sister Doris would be playing or getting dressed, and suddenly Leila might explode at them. When in a rage, Leila would verbally lash the children over and over again, calling them worthless, ungrateful, and selfish, telling them that they should feel ashamed. Number 5. Howard was, in a sense, the children's protector. Even though he didn't save them from Leila's eruptions, Howard still meant security, because when he was around, they were safe. However, Warren considered himself scarred for life. Number 6. Leila formed a much healthier relationship with her youngest child, Bertie, as the intervals between her rages lessened. Bertie knew her mother had a temper, but says she always felt loved. Warren and Doris never did, and Leila's obvious affection for Bertie didn't help their sense of worthlessness. Number 7. By the time Warren entered kindergarten, his hobbies and interests revolved around numbers. Around age 6, he became fascinated by the precision of measuring time in seconds and obsessed over numbers and watches. He also began to feel skeptical about religion. Insights from Chapter 7. Number 1. When Warren started first grade at Rose Hill School in 1936, he took to it right away. For one thing, it liberated him from spending part of the day at home with his mother. School opened up a whole new world for him, and right away, he made friends. Number 2. Warren was a competitive, intelligent, and precocious child. He didn't like sports and physical activities. He cried easily if anyone was mean to him, and worked hard to be liked and to get along with others. Yet, despite his cheerful demeanor, something about him struck his friends as lonely. Number 3. One evening, Warren felt a terrible pain in his belly. The doctor made a house call, then went home to bed, but intuitively, he went to see Warren and realized something was wrong. Later that night, Warren underwent surgery for a ruptured appendix, just in time before it was too late. Number 4. When he was a kid, Warren got to play the cornet at a school performance, echoing a trumpet player. Yet, during the performance, the first player played a wrong note, and Warren froze, having no idea if he should play the same note or the correct one. Number 5. That memory scalded itself into his brain forever. He had learned an important lesson that day. It might seem easier to go through life as the echo, but only until the person you're following plays a wrong note. Insights from Chapter 8. Number 1. The first few cents Warren Buffett ever earned came from selling packs of chewing gum. And from the day he started selling, at 6 years of age, he showed an unyielding attitude towards his customers that revealed much about his later style. Number 2. While politics was Howard's main interest and money a sideline, for his son, those interests were reversed. Warren hung around his father's office at the grand old Omaha National Bank building every chance he got, reading the trader column in Barron's and the books on his father's bookshelf. Number 3. Wall Street in 1940 had begun to revive from the crash, yet remained a chastened place. The men of Wall Street were like a band of hardy mercenaries, fighting on after most of their comrades had been felled in war. Number 4. Howard Buffett took his son down to Lower Manhattan to see one of the largest brokerage firms. Little Warren got to meet Sidney Weinberg, who was the most famous man on Wall Street. Number 5. At the end of their visit, Weinberg put his arm around him and said, "What stock do you like, Warren?" Buffett would never forget that Weinberg, a big shot on Wall Street, had paid such attention to him and seemed to care about his opinion. Number 6. One day, down at the Benson Library, he was captivated by a book called 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. It taught him that the way numbers exploded as they grew at a constant rate over time was how a small sum could turn into a fortune. Number 7. Sitting on the stoop at his friend Stu Erickson's, Warren announced that he would be a millionaire by the time he reached age 35. He was sure he could do it, but he didn't want to have responsibility for anyone else's money unless he was sure he could succeed. Insights from Chapter 9. Number 1. One Sunday afternoon in December, when Warren was 11, the Buffetts were driving back from church. As they listened to the radio in the car, the announcer broke in to say that the Japanese had struck Pearl Harbor. Warren quickly realized that the world was going to change. Number 2. Howard was running for office in Nebraska against a beloved Democrat to help take down President Franklin D. Roosevelt. He would go to the packing houses in South Omaha and try to win the Democratic-leaning workers over to his side. Warren accompanied him to make sure he was safe. Number 3. The family moved to Washington after Howard became a congressman. Warren, furious and miserable at being uprooted, wanted to be sent back to Omaha and reported a mysterious allergy that disturbed his sleep. Succumbing, the Buffetts put Warren on a train back to Nebraska for a few months' stay. Number 4. Warren developed crushes on girls in his class. Dorothy Hume, then Cloanne Call, a striking blonde. Yet they were not interested in him. He seemed unable to make any headway at all with girls. His way of diverting himself from disappointment was making money. Number 5. After his father took him to watch a couple of sessions of Congress, Warren decided he wanted to become a congressional page, but Howard was not in a position to pull that off. Number 6. Warren liked to work by himself, where he could spend his time thinking about things he wanted to think about. Washington was upsetting at first, but he was in his own world all the time. He had several small jobs. Number 7. At the end of 1944, Warren filed his first income tax return. He paid only $7. To reduce it, he deducted a few things as business expenses. He knew that was questionable, but at the time, he was not above cutting a few corners to get where he wanted to go. Number 8. At age 14, he had now fulfilled the promise laid out in his favorite book, 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. His savings now totaled around $1,000. He took great pride in that accomplishment. Insights from Chapter 10. Number 1. Bad grades, tax evasion, and running away were the least of Warren's troubles in junior high. His parents didn't know it, but their son had turned to a life of crime. He and his antisocial friends used to go to Sears and steal random things for fun. Number 2. The Buffetts were aghast. Warren was their gifted child, but by the end of 1944, he had become the school delinquent. By next spring, as Warren was starting high school, the Buffetts had had enough. Howard threatened to take away the source of his money if he didn't get serious. Number 3. Warren remembers being taken aback and devastated by the way his dad said that to him, because it was the first time he felt his father was disappointed in him. Insights from Chapter 11. Number 1. The disruption Warren had created in his family's life undoubtedly made his father's already challenging career as a new congressman no easier. Howard's rigidity impeded him from doing his job, which was to legislate. Number 2. The way Howard invariably held aloft his principles instead of working toward Republican Party goals by joining coalitions strained relationships with his colleagues and took a toll on the family. Number 3. Still 14 years old, Warren became a sophomore at Woodrow Wilson High School in February 1945. He wanted to be both special and normal at the same time. Much less mature than his classmates, he was being carefully watched by his parents, who were determined to see him straighten out. Number 4. Roosevelt's death sent most of the country into deep mourning, yet the Buffetts were celebrating. As for Warren, the death of a president meant another way to make money. Newspapers put out special editions, and he hustled himself out to the street corner, distributing papers while everybody mourned. Insights from Chapter 12. Number 1. Warren thought like a businessman, but didn't look like one. He fit uncomfortably into the high school crowd, showing up with the same tattered sneakers and droopy socks. He seemed to squirm in his seat all the time. Sometimes he looked shy, almost innocent. At others, he wore a sharp, tough expression. Number 2. Until now, Warren's efforts to get along with people had had mixed results. He charmed adults except for his teachers. He felt ill at ease with his peers, but had always managed to make a few close friends. He desperately wanted people to like him, and especially not to attack him personally. Number 3. Warren felt so disadvantaged socially that he needed a system to sell himself to people, a system he could learn once and use without having to respond in a new way to each changing situation. He found this in Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Number 4. In the book, rule number 1 was don't criticize, condemn, or complain. People don't want criticism. They want honest and sincere appreciation, wrote Carnegie. Warren put his mind to applying this rule to his own social life and found that it was working and doing wonders. He'd found his system. Number 5. By now, Warren had made a small fortune of $5,000 from delivering more than 500,000 newspapers. This money made up more than half his snowball. Rich as he was, however, Warren meant to keep that snowball rolling. Insights from Chapters 13 and 14. Number 1. Warren graduated 16th out of 350 in his high school class, putting future stockbroker under his picture in the yearbook. The first thing he did with his freedom was to go in on buying a used hearse, which he used to take a girl out on a date. Number 2. In the fall, Warren was starting college. The Buffetts had long taken for granted that he would attend the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School. He didn't want to go to college, however, as he felt he already knew what he wanted to do in life. He went anyway. Number 3. Warren's parents made him live with a roommate so that he could get accustomed to a more college-like, mature lifestyle. His roommate, Chuck, quickly grew tired of his sloppiness and immaturity, yet just as quickly grew fond of him and took care of him. Number 4. To Chuck, Warren seemed an odd mix of immature kid and brilliant prodigy. In many of his classes, He simply memorized what the professor said, foregoing the textbook. In an accounting course, the proctors had not even finished passing out the exams when Warren, showing off, stood up and turned in his paper. Number 5. Warren had joined the Young Republicans as a freshman because he was attracted to a girl who was a member. But instead of becoming her boyfriend, he became the group's president when he was a sophomore. Unfortunately for him, the Democrats won the election again, and his father was voted out of Congress. Insights from Chapter 15. Number 1. In the spring of 1950, Warren was close to finishing college. After 3 years, despite never being a fan of formal studying, he had fixed his ambitions on attending Harvard Business School, which offered him two important things: prestige and a network of future connections. Number 2. Warren was relying on his knowledge of stocks to make a good impression in the interview, but he had misunderstood Harvard's mission, which was to turn out leaders. When the letter arrived from Harvard refusing him admission, he was shocked. He then applied to Columbia, where he was accepted. Insights from Chapter 16. Number 1. Warren arrived in New York City alone. Unlike Penn, where his family was only a couple of hours away, he was on his own. And his father was once again immersed in politics, running to regain his seat in Congress, this time managing the campaign himself. Number 2. To his new friend Fred Stambach, it was clear Warren had already immersed himself in the stock market. Listening to him talk about it, Stambach became an instant disciple. He went out immediately and bought stocks for the first time in his life. Number 3. The door to the insurance world is one most people would rather keep firmly nailed shut. But insurance was taught in business schools. Warren had studied it at Penn, and there was an aspect of it a little like gambling that intrigued the odds maker in him. Number 4. Warren grasped that because GEICO sold insurance at the cheapest price, the only way it could make money would be to have the lowest possible costs and invest its customers' premiums long before the claims were paid. That sounded to him like getting to use somebody else's money for free, which appealed to him. Insights from Chapter 17. Number 1. Warren looked up to Ben Graham with worshipful awe. He had read the Northern Pipeline story over and over when he was 10 years old, well before he understood who Benjamin Graham was in the investing world. Now at Columbia, he hoped to bond with his teacher. Number 2. Graham's seminar was a crash course in the stock market, and he taught his students how to figure out how much a company was really worth by stripping apart the fine print to lay bare the rights of shareholders. Number 3. At first, Warren was a Graham acolyte, but he quickly became bored with the teacher's insistence on buying stocks at less than liquidation value. He wanted to invest in companies he thought were going to grow, not in companies that were about to go out of business. Insights from Chapters 18 to 20. Number 1. Warren Buffett took a course with Dale Carnegie to make himself a better speaker and get more dates with women. He then started dating Miss Nebraska winner, Vanita Brown, in New York, and back home, he started talking to Susie Thompson, though she wasn't receptive at first. Number 2. Eventually, Buffett and Susie fell in love and married on April 19, 1952. He worked harder than ever at the Buffett Falk firm to secure more income for him and his new family. Number 3. Susie recognized how much pain Buffett suffered from the lack of his mother's love. She worked to fix him and took care of him, almost as her child. They had their first daughter, Susan Alice, in 1953. Susie was a great mother. Number 4. Buffett was still learning from the Graham Newman firm about the art of capital allocation, placing money where it would earn the highest return. Over time, it could mean the difference between bankruptcy and success. Buffett named his first son, born in 1954, Howard Graham Buffett. Insights from Chapters 21 to 22. Number 1. Buffett got a job at Graham Newman, where he arbitraged stocks. It was an important moment in his career because he learned some tricks from Jay Pritzker that would help earn more money in his stock investments. Number 2. Visiting management was part of Buffett's way of doing business. He used those meetings to learn as much as he could about a company. Number 3. On May 1st, 1956, Buffett started Buffett Associates Limited, a partnership based on the Graham-Newman model with 7 partners. It kept growing and achieved great success. He was thus able to buy his first house to accommodate his growing family. Insights from chapters 23 to 26. Number 1. Buffett could use his brains and his partnership's money to alter the course of even a stubborn and unwilling company. By the end of 1960, he was richer than ever and becoming renowned for making his partners rich. Number 2. Including his outside investments, which totaled well over $500,000 by now, Buffett had become a millionaire at age 30. Number 3. As soon as they met, Buffett and Charlie Munger became great friends and spoke endlessly. Buffett convinced Munger to become an investor. While Buffett liked to invest in cheap items, Munger was the opposite. He liked to deal with big things, like tractors. Yet despite their different approaches, Munger regarded Buffett as the king of investing. Number 4. In 1963, U.S. President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, resulting in a huge loss for the stock market. A few months later, Howard Buffett passed away. Buffett was in utter shock and silent grief. Insights from chapters 27 to 34. Number 1. Berkshire Hathaway was a textile company that Buffett had bought shares in so that he could later resell them for more. When the textile business started declining, Buffett had a deal with the company's president, Seabury Stanton, to sell the shares for $11.50. Number 2. However, Stanton later sent a letter stating that he would only sell at $11.375. This infuriated Buffett because he thought they had a deal. So he decided instead of selling his stock, he would buy as much of it as he could, just to spite Stanton. Number 3. Eventually, Buffett bought enough stock in the company to get on its board, who appointed him director. He fired Stanton as payback. Number 4. Buffett saw that the textile business was not going to make him money, so he started expanding Berkshire Hathaway into the insurance industry with the purchase of National Indemnity Company. He then also bought Diversified Retailing and Sun newspapers, and thus began Berkshire's growth into a holding company. Number 5. As Buffett became richer and richer, worth several $1 million, his wife Susie asked him to retire and spend more time at home. But he couldn't stop working. She felt exhausted from taking care of people and was longing for someone to take care of her. Insights from chapters 35 to 42. Number 1. In 1972, George Goodman wrote a book called Supermoney, where he critiqued the 1960s stock market bubble. He painted all Wall Street investors as greedy, evil men, yet reserved a chapter for Warren Buffett as an authentic, intelligent investor. This made Buffett an overnight sensation. Number 2. By 1973, Buffett was not just an investor, but a business mogul. Berkshire Hathaway was thriving, and he dissolved all his partnerships in order to gain more control of the company's stock, except with his good friend, Charlie Munger. Number 3. What Berkshire Hathaway really possessed were 2 things. The first was the homeostatic business model, the idea of grafting float onto a holding company so that it could respond internally to the changing environment. The second was the power of compounding, as float and investments doubled and redoubled over time. Number 4. The novelty and strength of Buffett's model cannot be overstated. Nothing else like it existed, or would, for years to come. Number 5. Buffett was incredibly lucky. He had $100 million in capital at a time when the insurance industry and stock market were in a crisis. It was enough capital to buy companies at a low price and improve them. The timing was perfect for him, as he rose during a time when all else crashed. Number 6. Susie was becoming more and more frustrated with her marriage, as she felt Buffett's real marriage was with Berkshire Hathaway. He was often seen with Washington Post publisher Kay Graham, which led to speculations of infidelity. Susie wanted more out of life, so she started a singing career. Number 7. The singing gig didn't help Susie feel less miserable about her life. She decided to leave Buffett and move to California alone, and became involved with her tennis coach. Buffett was devastated, as he hadn't realized that he made her feel neglected and regretted this forever. Number 8. Buffett came to realize that sitting in a room making money was no way to spend a life. He began to see what he'd missed. He realized he never got to really know his kids or make friends, and spent the next few decades trying to mend his relationships. Insights from chapters 43 to 51. Number 1. At 53, Buffett was thinking through issues of philanthropy and inheritance. The subject that visibly unnerved him was retirement. He joked about working after he was dead. Number 2. On April 7, 1993, the Greater Omaha Chamber of Commerce put Buffett in the inaugural class of its Business Hall of Fame, alongside one of his beloved business partners, Rose Blumkin. He donated $1 million to a theater she was renovating, and nobody could believe it. Number 3. In 1991, a huge controversy involving Berkshire Hathaway took place concerning the investment bank of which it had acquired 12%, Salomon Inc. The U.S. Treasury learned that Salomon trader Paul Moser was involved in submitting false bids so that they could purchase more Treasury bonds than permitted. They fined Salomon $190 million. Number 4. Buffett stepped in as chairman of Salomon to handle the crisis, and he worked closely with the Treasury to reverse the bans imposed on the bank. His testimony in Congress as the reformer and savior of Salomon had turned him from a rich investor into a hero. Number 5. The success of his unorthodox approach to scandal, embracing regulators and law enforcers instead of evading, touched the yearning for nobility in many people's hearts, the dream that honesty is rewarded, that the besmirched can be redeemed through honor. Number 6. Even as the furor from the crisis died, Buffett's star rose. In his presence, people felt like they were near greatness, and the press was constantly calling him. Berkshire stock took off on a meteoric streak, bursting past $10,000 a share. He was now worth $4.4 billion. Insights from chapters 52 to 57. Number 1. After Buffett's mother Lila died on his 66th birthday, the family assembled for a funeral. Their grieving complicated by a cauldron of mixed emotions. Lila had bad blood with most of the family, including her son. Buffett cried in regret over what their relationship could have been. Number 2. In 2000, after having made his infamous Sun Valley speech against investing in technology, his reputation started taking a plunge, with people and journals criticizing his old-fashioned thinking and his investment method, which up till now had been seen as immaculate. Shareholders started selling their stock, and its price took a dive. Number 3. Buffett was taken aback by the sudden bad press, but never did he go back on his word or engage in smear campaigns. He stood his ground and made his position firm and clear to his shareholders, so that they could decide for themselves whether to trust him or cash in. Number 4. Many people understood the message. Buffett's willingness to firmly stand by Berkshire stock made such a statement that the stock price rose 24%, and as he predicted, the following week, the Nasdaq, an index full of technology stocks, crashed 31%. It was among the largest losses in historic terms. Number 5. As Buffett grew larger than life, he remained brilliant at balancing his priorities. His view that commitments are sacred and his natural inclination to conserve energy saved him from succumbing to the flattery of being in demand. He did only what made sense and what he wanted to do. Number 6. In September 2003, Fortune magazine named Buffett the most powerful person in business. His life was on a personal high, and his face was selling magazines. Insights from chapters 58 to 62. Number 1. Susie was diagnosed with stage 3 oral cancer. It meant near certain death, and the family was absolutely devastated. Though they had grown apart over the years, Buffett decided to spend her last days with her as much as he could and take care of her. Number 2. The man who had always been on the receiving end was now learning to give. Rather than being taken care of by his wife, he was taking care of her. By acting out his values, loyalty, and stewardship, he seemed, in his own way, to have incorporated some of the lessons of Susie's life into his own. Number 3. Susie fought for her life and managed to get rid of her cancer, but suffered a cerebral hemorrhage a while later and passed away, leaving Buffett in grave mourning. She had finally left him for good. She was the most important person he had ever known. Number 4. Buffett didn't allow his sadness to overtake him, and he didn't fall apart after Susie's death. He wanted to be tough for her. That toughness helped him not just to survive, but to adapt and even to grow. As each month passed, he began to deal more acceptingly with endings and mortality and to connect with his children in a new way. Number 5. For a long time, Buffett had felt that society was best served if he kept compounding the money rather than giving it away, so that there would be more to give away. But he realized this was a facet of his struggle with endings, loss, and letting go. Number 6. Over the years, in a profound shift, he was working his way through the problem of letting go of money and became more generous, gifting his family members money and making large donations to charities in memory of Susie. Number 7. On June 26, 2006, Buffett announced that he would give away 85% of his Berkshire Hathaway stock, worth $37 billion at the time, to a group of foundations over a number of years. No gift of this size has ever been made in the history of philanthropy. Number 8. The man who was, at the time, the second richest person on earth was giving away his money without leaving a trace of himself behind. He had spent all his life rolling up the snowball as if it were an extension of himself, yet he would establish no foundation, college, or building with his name on it. We hope you enjoyed Insights on Alice Schroeder's The Snowball. Purchase the book to learn more.